Get ready for some real, honest conversation. I'm your host, Camilla. Grab your coffee, tea, or whatever's in your cup, have a seat, and let's talk about it. So, native flowers.
Yeah, native flowers.
Let's get into it.
Okay. So, first, I'm just wondering, first of all, I'm really excited to talk about native flowers. It's really important to me. What made you want to have this chat today?
Well, we've talked about it before, and it just sparked my interest with maybe how much I don't know about these things when it comes to nature and like preserving what we have or even protecting what we have.
Yeah.
You know, and especially around here, you find a lot of these random flowers. So I'll take pictures of them on an app to identify them. And it turns out that they're either, what is it? Not an infestation. What's the other word?
Invasive species.
Invasive.
Yeah.
Or they've been somehow cultivated.
Yeah.
I can't remember what the other one is.
Naturalized.
Yeah.
Which a lot of people will say, oh, it's not invasive, it's naturalized. And they're uninformed about what that actually means, because in truth, it's a invasive species. Because what an invasive species is, it's something that's been brought outside of its ecozone. So a lot of them often come from Asia, and they'll come in, and because they don't have any natural predators and nothing is feasting on them, because our native species don't like them. And so they flourish, and then they actually, not only are they not beneficial, they actually will overtake the natural spaces of our native species that are food for and places to hide and sleep and overwinter on, and they'll basically take them out. So they'll outcompete them because they themselves don't have any natural predators, which also means, again, they're not helping our ecosystem at all, and actually negatively impacting it.
I feel like there's a lot to unpack in just that alone.
Yeah.
So let's take it back a bit. When did you in your life start to get into all of this?
Very recently, actually.
Okay.
Yeah, very recently. So like everyone else, you start with gardening with, you want to kind of beautify your surroundings, right? So because they're beautiful, flowers are beautiful. I mean, here we are, this is a perfect time for this conversation.
Yeah.
Because it's spring and we want some color. Yep. And that's turned into, what can we do to our front yards? How can it be appealing? And what has happened, I started getting into that and saying, how am I going to beautify my property? And I'm going to, put in things like hydrangea and all your begonias and petunias and impatiens and things like that. And I'm relatively new, and I'm not an expert at all. But as I started to delve into, gardening, very quickly I started hearing about all of the actual negative things that gardening is actually doing to our ecosystem, which you wouldn't think.
Interesting.
Because usually gardening is synonymous with nature and beauty, and get your fingers in the dirt and you're in nature. And the more I learned, which I just didn't even realize, is how much a lot of it, first of all, the plastic. I've got so many plastic trays because I won't throw anything away. I try to reuse them. But if you're going to a nursery, then sometimes people just ditch all the plastic, But, even our local greenhouse here, they take it back, which is great. So they'll take it back and they'll wash it and sterilize it. So I really love that they do that. Lawrence's Springwater farm. So that's fantastic that they do that. And then so I was learning about the fertilizers, obviously. And so you put fertilizers and people over fertilize, and that basically can cause algae blooms in our local ecosystems, right? And then of course the antagonist and the demons of the gardening industry would be our pesticides and herbicides.
Oh my gosh.
Right. So then not only, you love the natural world, people love birds. They love, because most gardeners, when I talk to them, they love birds, but they just, nobody knows, just like I didn't know. And so I wasn't really using a lot of this stuff anyway. It was just when I was starting to listen to podcasts and do reading, and it just kind of came up how bad this stuff was. And it's cancer causing. Yeah. So, and like glyphosates, Roundup, right? And people are becoming more informed. And so you don't have to go far to find out how terrible these are for our ecosystem. And I do understand that, people need to eat. And I do understand that, for right now, it's the best way to get the most food out to the most people. But we are a adaptable species and we can find better ways.
Yeah, that's what I
right?
was thinking.
Yeah.
And it's funny because last spring we let our yard kind of go wild for a little bit to give some food to the early birds and bees and all that.
Yeah.
And I had a lot of people make comments about how, we should cut down our weeds and this, that, and the other because it's going to spread and all this kind of stuff. And I was like, but I don't care.
Yeah.
And I've had people tell me with our garden boxes to spray everything with Roundup. And I said, I was like, I don't know that I want to do that because it could damage the soil, or like we're consuming this, then what? And they said that, if you just like spray it, it'll go down the stem and into the roots and only kill that. But you have sure, but it's still getting into the soil.
Yeah.
And I don't know, to me, it seems pretty important to give these little creatures, I guess we can call them, some food from, especially depending on what kind of a winter we've had, to start back up, right? Like for the spring, for the summer, and so on.
Absolutely.
So but I find that around here, Roundup is very popular.
Yep. And again, I totally understand, especially with there's a lot of farmers, but there's no need for your backyard hobbyist gardener like you or I to need to use any of that stuff. And the idea is if you are planting native plants, you're going to introduce a proper ecosystem where the insects will take care of some of these pests that will infest. And I'll tell you right now, my native garden, I don't use anything and I have no problem with pests on any of my native plants. No, I come home, I've got a section that's probably about 15 by 15 in my backyard. It's just straight up square. And I come home after work and just sit there and look, and it's just amazing everything that you can see. People traditionally just know about, like bumblebees and honeybees, and honeybees are not even native, but they're still awesome pollinators. They're great, but they do somewhat outcompete some of our native bees, which are our sweat bees and our mason bees. And I mean, honeybees are great, and bumblebees are a stronger, more robust bee as well. But a lot of our native species are becoming extinct and being outcompeted by these other bees, which the idea is nothing against honeybees, but if we plant different types of food for them, which are these native plants, that is going to give them something to eat. Whereas in the honeybees and the bumblebees, they can eat like a lot of flowers that are not necessarily native. Like I love zinnia, for example. Like I am not a purist by any means in terms of like having just natives. And then I'm like, well, I mean, sure, I'm going to have some begonias in my yard, but I'm also going to find a little place to add some natives so that we can give some food to, as you were saying earlier, to these specialist natives that are a part of our ecosystem. And it goes up the food chain, right? So, then our birds, right, our dragonflies and our animals, they also feast on those animals as well. As soon as you cut them off at the bottom, it's obviously going to have an impact higher up the food chain. So natives are a good way that every person can do something small to literally make a difference. And it's not something that takes multiple years. You plant it, they will come.
Yeah, that's very true.
Yeah.
Okay, so with native plants, do you know some native flowers or plants in general off the top of your head that you can list for us?
Yeah, well, okay, so the idea is that if people are listening to this and they are at all into native plants, they'll know that there's this gentleman named Doug Tallamy, and he's like basically right now the big conservationalist that has this initiative, which is called the Homegrown National Park.
Okay.
Yeah, Homegrown National Park. And you can actually go on this website and you can actually go on there and you can say, okay, I am planting this native species. I have this, and you can make like a commitment. Now, the long range goal is that there's so many places in the world that have been eliminated, right? So for agriculture, housing, so these animals don't have these way stations to move through as they migrate to eat. Right? So what he wants people to do, us as like a grassroots movement, is to have these little way stations everywhere that the animals will be able to have food on their journey. And what he's identified is, yes, it would be wonderful if everybody could contribute 100% of their land to, native species, but that's not realistic. But what he did say is you should really look at what's called keystone plants to do whatever natives you want. But keystone plants are ones that will provide food and shelter for the most amount of species, right?
Okay.
The most amount of species are called keystone plants. And so that would be, if people are wanting to start planting natives, that's what they should make sure they have in their garden, because you have a lot of like individual native plants that might only support 1 or 2 species. But first and the most paramount keystone species are oak trees. Oak trees are incredible. They support over 300 species in an oak tree. They are incredible. So if people can plant oak trees, but again, that's not necessarily possible. But that is like, if you get some oak trees going on, that's great, right? And some of the other ones are goldenrods, which I'm sure you see them in the fall. And there's many different kinds. And sometimes people do feel that goldenrods are a little aggressive, but there's many different species that some are less aggressive than others. So for example, I've got zigzag goldenrod, which is it can handle like shady environments. And so the zigzag goldenrod, and it doesn't spread like the goldenrod. But if you have a big, huge meadow, because it depends on who you are and how much space you have. Like eventually, I actually want at some point to have a big plot of land that we can like maybe put a trailer on and something. And I want to create a full wildflower meadow, and I just want to be able to go to the trailer. Right. And then, cause the life that you see, it's soothing. Like when I come home from work, I just go and I just watch what's happening in the garden. And there's bees that you think that they're flies. They're almost microscopic when you look at them, and we just think honeybees, bumblebees, but there's so many different varieties and varieties that need our help. And if you have a vegetable garden and you want to bring pollinators to your yard. And then of course there's the larger goal of let's try to rebuild our ecosystem. And it's something that we can do as individuals when there's so much in the world we can't do much about.
I remember last year with my garden, some plants that we had, for example, broccoli, I would let some of it, although I planted at the wrong time of year, so it just grew in shoots as opposed to like ahead of broccoli, but it's a learning curve. But some of the shoots I let go to flower because we had hummingbirds coming by and like different bees and just always something flying around, buzzing and collecting food. So I thought like, well, why would I cut that down? I'm just going to let it go to flower, let them do their thing, collect what they need and continue on their way. Yeah.
Amazing. And cutting back is what a lot of people say to do in gardening. And a lot of times that's where bees will overwinter, in the stems of plants. And that's what they'll use. The same with they also hang out on all the leaf litter. So, and when people clean it all up, that all of their nesting sites and their hibernation places are being, and
so speaking of which, I do remember my husband was saying that he read somewhere or heard somewhere that in the fall when you're collecting your leaves to not pick everything up and toss it because there are insects or critters or whatever that have created homes within those bunches of leaves. And so we're essentially taking that away. And I could see that having an impact on our ecosystem too. And I remember with our garden, we would plant a bunch of marigolds to help keep some pests away, which I think it did a pretty good job. And it was cool too, because I would sit there. I love deadheading them and watching them just bloom bigger and fuller. And the one day I was out there popping off the heads of them and, well, the dead ones, not of all of them. But then, you see the bees flying around and then the bee would rest and take a nap on the flower. And I'd be like, okay, I'm going to leave this area alone so you can take your nap. And it was super cool to see, I don't know, being out there working with them. Essentially, right? You're doing your thing, but then they're doing their thing.
And have you ever been stung?
No, never.
Of course you haven't. They don't sting you. The bees are really good. I was stung one time by a wasp, which wasps are demonized, but they are fantastic pollinators. They are amazing pollinators. So, there's a lady, I'm not sure what her name is, but she wrote a whole book on wasps to try to get people to try to dispel the myths on wasps.
I think a lot of people hate wasps.
And I walked into my greenhouse one day and and it had a nest in there. And so I didn't realize, and boom, boom, I got 2 stings. All I did after that, so I did say, sorry, you have to go wasp house. So I did have to remove it.
Yeah.
But then what I did is I just got I looked online, I got a paper bag, and I just hung it to the top of the greenhouse, and I haven't had anybody come in there.
And like there's a home.
It's already been, so they, you know, they might be aggressive, but they also don't invade another space. They're like, oh, that's already occupied. So they move on. So there's simple things that we can do to live with nature, you know, and and back to some of those keystone species. So oaks, goldenrods, anything in the aster family, of course, all native. So it's really important to realize, and I kind of figured this out early on too, just because it says aster doesn't mean it's a native aster.
Oh, interesting.
You know, and then all your milkweeds are hugely important as well. Your monarda, you're like your bee balm or wild bergamot. And there's all these names too that can be really like a little bit confusing for people. But if you're going to the right source for your plants, then you know that they're native.
And there is a website, we talked about this before, where you can order like a packet of native flower seeds that they get sent to you. Do you remember what that website was called?
Okay, so there's quite a few websites. I don't know about that one in particular. Do you mean you don't mean for free, do you? Like you just order them and
not for free, but purchase.
Yeah. Okay. Oh, there's quite a few. I would encourage people to buy them from Ontario because the Ontario businesses are going to have the species that are native to Ontario. So when possible, try to get ones that's as close to your ecozone. So Northern Wildflowers, they are based out of Sudbury, and they have, I don't know, at least over 40 for sure different species of wildflowers. And they also have a whole host of food seeds as well.
I think that was the one, yeah.
Yep. So Northern Wildflower. Then there's also the Wildflower Farm, and they have I think they have over 100, and they're based out of Coldwater, which is like around near Barrie and Penetang area. So and I think they've been operating since like something like 1968.
Oh wow.
Something like that. And then there's a smaller one, which I really like because it's very local. And this girl's out of Hamilton, and it's called Bee Kissed Seeds. And why I love that one is because when I got my first pack of seeds, not only does she just does this because of the pure passion and her desire to try to help the ecosystem, is that all of her packaging is like newspaper print, and she folds it in this really ornate pattern, and then your seeds are in there. So, you know, I'm like, oh, what a great way to not put too much impact on the environment with plastic, because that's the only thing with gardening sometimes that I get a little bit perturbed with, and that's the plastic use. So how can we kind of reuse? How can we use better materials in gardening? So those are 3 great sites. I've ordered from all of them, and I've had great germination rates with all of them.
And the Bee Kiss Seeds, is it like BEE or just BE?
Yeah, it's BE. Yeah.
So I'll include all of these in the episode description.
Excellent.
For everyone if they're interested.
Yeah.
So now you mentioned Ontario, and so anyone listening who, let's say, lives in the States or Western somewhere or this, that, and the other, obviously it'll depend on their region what will be native to them, right?
Yep.
So it's a matter of just like researching the native species in their area and a way to help their environment and their little critters out, right?
Absolutely. And there's a book called The Northeastern Plant Primer by a guy named Uli Lorimer. And what he does, and I believe he's done a couple of other books since I purchased that one. And so that one, I mean, plants don't know political boundaries. So, you know, in the States, often in Michigan and, you know, and northern states, they're going to have very similar native plants to us. I mean, and there might be some variations here and there, but it's going to be very similar. They do move, that it's a long, like a very long range. We have very similar winters. Like, I mean, I think you even know from being down south that sometimes it's warmer here than it is in like the Muskoka area, and so very similar climates. So anyway, that's a great resource. And I don't know how many, I think there's definitely about 153 different plants, and it might even be more than that, but that he has in that book. And it really talks about what they pair with, what kind of conditions, because if someone is interested in this, and I hope they are, you really want to make sure like the right plant needs to be in the right place.
Right.
So if you have sort of a moist soil or a sandy soil or a dry soil, then you're going to want to get plants that fit that. Because again, one great thing about native plants as well is they belong here. So we looked at, I mean, we've been having drier summers. And so you can find like drought resistant native plants, like your lanceolate coreopsis, your coneflowers, and others. And you can look this all up and it'll say this is a drought tolerant plant. And then, so once it's established, you don't have to worry about watering the heck out of it like you do with a lot of the annuals that you buy from the nursery. And let's be honest, a lot of these nursery plants, not only do they use a lot of resources, water resources, which is becoming, in some places, not here, but in a lot of places, we're good. We got lots of water here. But in a lot of places, water is a pretty precious resource. And so why are we watering something that is pretty much like putting a bowl of plastic fruit on your counter? You know, it's beautiful, it's decorative, but it's literally not providing any help for anybody. And if anything, you know, like people are fertilizing it and that's actually causing harm. But let's vary it up. Let's try to weave in some native plants into our traditional gardens. And the crazy thing is a lot of these people, I haven't seen this firsthand, but just from a lot of the podcasts that I've listened to, people who have headed over to Europe, they've got our native plants over in Europe because it's rare and exotic to them. And so they're having the same problems with the plants that we have native to our system that our animals benefit from over there, wreaking havoc in there. Because, you know, so it's funny, people want what is different and unique, and they overlook what's right in our backyard, which is actually helping the ecosystem, you know, because
that's interesting.
Because some of those stats out there of pollinator decline is pretty staggering, and with some species like completely extinct, and the little things that we can do are.
And are we, I feel like I read something about this recently, are we on the up and up with the bees? Like, I don't know if you've heard anything recently where, I don't know if it was bees, but something was going extinct and now we're on the up and up with that and they're seeing more.
They're seeing more pollinators?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I think, you know what, honestly, there was a show. It was like a show that, you know, and not even like a real show, not even a documentary, that someone, it was like, and I forget, Emma Stone is in it. Emma Stone, and it's, and anyway, she's, I don't want to do any, I don't want to give any spoilers about the movie, but she actually says at some point, oh, people were worried about the pollinators. The pollinators are coming back. So that's actually the only time that I, like everything that I look up right now, there's still like a pollinator issue. But maybe, but I'm sure if you're thinking about it and it was in that movie, there probably is some kind of upswing. Like, there is some kind of like which is, and I'm not sure the reasons why. I don't know, because I do know that people are becoming a little bit more careful with what they're using in the garden. And hopefully it's for nature, but I mean, they're also realizing too that these products are harming themselves, their families, their animals, and recognizing that they want organic food. They don't want these poisons in their body. So I don't know if that's the reason why, or if there's a possibility that they're becoming resistant, or they'll be able to survive the herbicides or pesticides. And if that's a thing, I don't know about it. That would be great. But I'm not sure, because we still know that for humans, we are definitely, because they've got quicker life cycles. So maybe the pollinators are, but again, I don't want to start saying anything that isn't true, but humans definitely aren't. And it would take us multiple generations to become resistant. And there'll be a lot of terrible things that happen. Hormone disruption, cancers, different illnesses that are coming from those. And there's been so many farmers in the podcasts that I've listened to, and companies that have sued Roundup and won, because they've used these for so long. And you have both people in the couple who both have the same kind of cancer from.
It's interesting because there is a neighboring town around here that has a big sign about glyphosate and the effects of it. And I recently listened to a podcast, which I can send to you as well if you're interested, that they went into a deep dive on that and the effects of it on the human body. So it's nice that that information is coming forward. And I do agree that we're getting into those generations that are Not that the old
Yeah.
generations didn't care, but just, I guess, awareness is the key thing. That we're a bit more aware. Information is easier to come across, right? Especially with social media and everything. It's at the click of our fingers.
Yeah.
And I can see a change happening in the next even like 15, 20 years, right? 50 years. I don't know if I'll be around in 50 years, but like I can see those changes happening just based on how people are approaching things nowadays.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool.
Yeah. And I agree. I think most people want to do the right thing. Mm-hmm. I just know this about people. I teach, I see like the microcosm of society in my class, and I see the majority of people want to do the right thing. It truly, truly comes down to information. Mm-hmm. If you tell someone, if you over fertilize, you're going to create algae blooms, which is going to bring the property value of your cottage down. Mm-hmm. Never mind with the havoc it's wreaking in the ecosystem. But on both layers, if they know, they'll say, oh, I did not know that. And that's because these companies, these businesses don't want you to know that, and they've gotten away with it for a long time. I don't have the specifics because it was a long time ago that I learned about this, but a lot of our pesticides and herbicides come out of the war where they used chemical warfare. And once the war was over, they didn't have any way to thrive as a business. So they refabricated chemical warfare into pesticides and herbicides, and purely for business reasons. Yeah. And then all of these persuasive techniques were used on the farmers. And so that's their law, that's their understanding, because they were so successful in making them believe that this was good and right, and this is how you're going to feed the most people, this is how you're going to support your family. Mm-hmm. And of course, all of the negative stuff was never talked about. And they wouldn't have even known that it was the chemical companies out of World War II that were basically started the pesticide and herbicide industry. But anybody wanting to research that, you can go down that, you can go down that sort of path. And that's kind of where it came out of. Yeah. Which, I mean, that freaked me out the first time I learned about that. I'm so like, because sometimes you think, what are we? We're so dumb, but then we're not. It's just life is busy. Yeah. Life is busy, and we're putting food on the table. We're making dinner. We're taking care of the kids, and there's not enough time to know everything. You know?
And even with that said, with life is busy, they're coming out with these convenient ways. Yeah. Not exactly, or not necessarily the healthy ways, but convenient ways of throwing a dinner together for your family. Because, I don't know, you're running late from work or whatever it may be, right? It's the convenience of things has really, in my opinion, gotten a little out of control to the point where it's too convenient. If this world were to absolutely go to complete shit, pardon my language, I don't know how many of us would actually survive based on convenience.
Yeah.
I know we're getting a little off topic.
No, but absolutely. Absolutely. It's cycling back to what we were talking about earlier. Just spray it. Spray it. Whereas there's other ways to take care of pests by having a full ecosystem, a balanced garden and balanced natural spaces. And it takes care of itself. Yeah. Nature takes care of itself. And there's ways to plant. Now, I mean, I do not know when it comes to farming, but there are definitely changes happening in the gardening industry because they are, but when you're looking at monoculture, I don't know how you get away without herbicides and pesticides right now. I mean, it's just, the idea is whole systems need to change, and that's why it's taking so long. Yeah. But this is, that's a completely different topic because that's farming. This is our homes. This is the spaces that we have control over. And going back to Doug Tallamy, what he's saying is if we could just instill the ethos and moral obligation of people to just take care of the space that you call yours, whether that is in an apartment on a balcony, or if you've got 40 acres, or if you can commit to helping the ecosystem and being a steward for the environment in the place that you have control over, or even a section of the place that you've got control over, man, what changes we would see.
Yeah.
You know, how many more birds we would see. Like I love hummingbirds, for example.
Yeah.
Like hummingbirds are the best. I mean, who doesn't like hummingbirds,
Yeah.
right? But a lot of ways that people attract these hummingbirds is hummingbird feeders. Now, hummingbird feeders, you know, are often in plastic and they leach BPAs because they're usually not BPA free. And I've checked. And so you've got these small little creatures and they're drinking water from a plastic feeder that is leaching plastics. We all know about microplastics, and this is what we're drinking. And welcome to worse than McDonald's, right? And nectar, which I mean, sugar water isn't actually nectar, only makes up like 13% of a hummingbird's diet. It's actually mostly insects. Right?
Oh,
and how are you going to bring insects in? You're going to through native flowers.
Yeah.
And so how much more wonderful would it be to have like a stand of cardinal flower or great blue labella? These are all tubular flowers that hummingbirds like, or foxglove beard tongue. You know, the first time my cardinal flower blossomed and for the first time I saw a hummingbird drinking out of my cardinal flower was way more rewarding. That's awesome. But the hummingbird feeders, they need to be clean like every few days in the summer, because otherwise there's bacteria and there's fungi that kill them.
So years ago, I had a hummingbird feeder that I put up in a backyard, and this was before like I knew any of this. It was just this plastic thing that I bought from whatever store, sugar water, that whole bit. And yeah, every few days I would go out to check on it. And what I found really disgusting about it was that a lot of earwigs would get into those little fake flower things where the hummingbird would go. Yeah. And there'd be so many just drown in there and just like wrapped around because I guess they're attracted to that like sweetness of it. And
yeah, of course.
In this case, I had it hanging up on a tree. So I'm sure that they just climbed on the branch and down the little string and stuff. Yeah. But it was so disgusting to clean. I know that earwigs have their place in this world too, but
of course, yeah,
you know, you don't want to have to take a toothpick to pick it out from, I don't know, the little flower part thing because it curled up in there and then it died. It was just,
and then it killed part of the, you know, the system, which a bird could have eaten or, you know, and because all, like, again, the food chain, right? All the way up the food chain, animals are benefiting. So when you say native plants, a lot of people think right away, the pollinators, right? The bees, the butterflies, which are lovely and beautiful. But I think everybody loves the songbirds as well. And how many of our warblers and our sparrows, our robins, chickadees. Yeah. I mean, it takes, I don't know how many, but I think it's upwards of a couple of thousand, like 5,000 to 6,000 caterpillars for a chickadee in order to see a brood of her chicks to flight.
Wow.
6,000 for one little chickadee. That's so times that chickadee by all the other birds that are dependent on insects in order to survive and to breed and to produce more of them. What is in our ecosystem that they're providing those caterpillars and insects for those birds, that's right? Crazy. I know, that's like a staggering number, right? Yeah. So yeah.
Just go collect a bunch of caterpillars. Here you go. Just let them take them.
Absolutely. Wow. And that's the thing that sometimes people will start planting native plants and they'll say, oh no, there's some holes on the leaves. That's great, right? That's great because you're giving food to the natural environment. And so this is a good thing. It's kind of like thinking differently rather than like pushing everything away. You know, why aren't we're encouraging food that is helping the natural world.
So that's like, you got my brain going right now, going back to the broccoli plant. I don't know what the pest is called. Well, insect, whatever. It's maybe like a little caterpillar or something, but they attack, I think, cabbage leaves and broccoli leaves and all that, and they'll leave the big holes. And so I know that people who garden or farm, like I've seen YouTube videos before of how to take care so that these holes don't happen.
Right.
But I don't know, for me, it's like, well, they're not affecting the actual, like for me, in this case with the broccoli, they weren't actually affecting the broccoli itself, although they weren't growing well because of me. But go ahead, eat the leaf if you want. If you leave me the flower part of it before it flowers, then I'm happy with that because I'm sure that you can use a lot of the broccoli plant. I don't know that information, or at least not yet. So I wouldn't know what to do with a broccoli leaf anyways. Right. I know you can use like the stalks for soups and stuff, but like the leaf specifically.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've never heard of anyone taking leaves and doing something with them. I mean, maybe, but I don't know. So I don't know. It's just, it is interesting how, like, I get it. You want to feed your family, like we talked about, and have food. Or if you're, you have like a farm stand, you want to sell. So sure, you need
a bit of a different.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
That's a different. Yeah, absolutely. And I totally get that when,
Yeah.
For food, that sometimes there's measures that people need to take. And if non-toxic methods have not worked, then sometimes people need to use these things. But pests, in a lot of ways, because people don't like being uncomfortable at all or taking that extra step, sometimes they do hurt more than they realize, and they might not even realize. I mean, you take a look at, actually it's getting more and more common where people are getting their properties sprayed for mosquitoes.
Oh yeah.
Right? So they get their properties sprayed for mosquitoes because the advertisers just say it's the mosquitoes that are getting sprayed. And I mean, I kind of just knew instinctually that, okay, there's no way that this product is only targeting mosquitoes. Like, come on. And you just have to do a little search anywhere. It kills everything. And your bees, your butterflies, those overarching mosquito sprays, you're creating a dead environment for...
Because you can buy them too, right? And it's got like a little fan on it or something. So when you turn it on, it lets out this...
Oh,
what is that?
You're talking about the thermocels. So the ones that you like get at like your box stores.
Would that be similar to like having someone come to your property? And I mean, obviously,
I think it's a stronger chemical, but what's in the thermocels is called alethrin, and it is a toxic chemical. It is a toxic chemical. And so you stick that in your backyard and you are killing your mosquitoes, yes, but you're also killing your butterflies, your moths, your bees, everything. Not only that, it's a chemical. You don't see it, but then it falls into the ground, leaches into the water, wreaks havoc on your amphibians and your fish. So it poisons and kills your salamanders, your frogs, your fish. So if you take, say, a really populated area like Muskoka, for example, and you've got all these cottagers right on the water, and they've all got their thermocels, you are killing your aquatic life, not on top of your pollinators. Like those thermocels, if I honestly, in gardening and everything that we're talking about, if I could do one thing, I mean, obviously I'd like to really plant native plants and and you're in creative, but honestly, people will have native plants in their garden and then they'll stick a thermocell.
That's crazy.
Because these companies, they purposefully advertise and there's no one checking. The only people that check is ourselves. It's us that we have to take responsibility for the behaviors that we do and look beyond. And sadly, you have to question any business that's trying to make money from us. And it doesn't matter. I mean, this is gardening, this is native plants, but anything in society, you have to look beyond too, because what you're giving your kids, what you're ingesting in yourself, you're wearing wireless headphones, whatever it is, understand that there could be negative things happening and no one has your best interest. What it is they want to sell their product. So the responsibility lies on us. But if I could like get rid of all the thermocels, because people, like great, really awesome people will talk about their thermocels. I'm like,
and the thing too is that if they're, let's say, sitting outside and enjoying the nice summer day and they got their thermocell going, isn't there a little bit of like inhalation happening too, to a certain degree? So then we're inhaling that. I mean,
absolutely.
It might be very, very minor.
Very minor. Yeah, very minor.
Right?
Over time and the amount obviously would have a health effects on people, but because we're larger, more complex organisms, it's something that we wouldn't see probably until our like 80s and whatever. And, you know, might shave a couple of years off our life, but people aren't really, you know, so, but the smaller, less complex animals, it's immediate, you know? So, yes, but it's really trying to walk through the world in a way that is going to cause the least amount of harm, you know? And if we can leave the world a little bit better, isn't that something that we can?
Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah.
So earlier you had mentioned most plants come from Asia.
Oh, for the, Asia, Europe. You know,
would that be just from people like bringing their plants over here because it's something exotic and new? Okay. Something shiny and different.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Okay. I see. And then what about the fertilizer, because you had mentioned earlier about over fertilizing. Do you know much about that?
Just that it leaches into the groundwater
Mm-hmm.
and it goes into the ecosystem, and basically that it's what aids to algae blooms.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
And an algae bloom sounds like not a big deal, but the algae in the water is just basically becoming prolific
Mm-hmm.
because it's a fertilizer, right? So it's just
Mm-hmm.
like, right?
Mm-hmm.
And in an algae bloom, when you say it, doesn't seem like a big deal. But this is toxic water. That means like when it says, okay, there's an algae bloom on whatever lake,
Yeah,
do not swim, do not ingest, because it can get you very, very ill. And once algae blooms happen, it's more possible for them to happen in the future.
And so, because I don't know that I've actually ever seen an algae bloom on a lake. So, can you describe what one would look like if, let's say, you went
it
to
would
a
just
lake and
look
it was
like,
infested?
yeah, well, like the section would be like, it would be almost like, it looks like a layer of green
Oh, okay.
over top of the water.
Okay, so that's what I'm picturing.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah, unless of course you disturb it, and then it would settle, and then you might not even realize that there is an algae bloom, or it could be like off in the far corner, and then it's moving its way underneath as well. But if you were to look up pictures of algae bloom, you would see if it's an undisturbed bit of water, you would just see kind of like a layer of green over top of the water. But yeah, a lot of these cottage associations and things like that will test the water, and that's usually how they'll sort of find out.
Yeah.
But they can be visible too. They can be visible, but not necessarily. Again, if there's a little bit of movement in the water, you might not see it. So you could go into water without realizing that there's an algae bloom in there. But at its worst, there'd be a film. But you could totally walk into a lake that is currently in algae bloom, and there's been a public notice about it, and it's toxic. So yeah.
I do know that there is one lake up here that is essentially drying out, and I think it's people who use a lot of Roundup on their land, and it's just kind of making its way into the water. I don't know if that's why it dried up, or like there's still water there, but it's not like a lake. I'm sure like it used to be.
Yeah.
But it's definitely not somewhere you'd want to dip your toes, especially with how much maybe chemicals are in that water. I don't know.
Yeah. And I think with awareness, like ecosystems bounce back. They do bounce back. You look at Sudbury, like Killarney Provincial Park, and they had the smokestacks, and they were really, really low. And then they had kind of like acid rain, and it basically decimated all the ecosystem in the provincial park. And so they stopped boating in there. Actually, they raised the smokestacks, and so they just made them higher. And it started to rebound. And one of the first ways you know that an ecosystem is healthy is like your salamanders and your frogs, and because they're the first to go, because they're some of the most sensitive.
Right.
And once it's established and it's coming back to more of a natural state, they will come back. And then you can say, oh, okay, it's starting to rebound. This is fantastic.
Right.
So, and it's really, it's those chemicals. And I mean, I don't know. I mean, there might be people out there. I know there's, an onslaught of people that believe, well, this is the natural progression of things. This is the way evolution happens. They should mutate and deal with. And it's like, first of all, human nature is changing, like our behavior is changing so fast, and everything changes so fast. There's no way the natural world can keep up with that. It takes multiple generations of, in order to be so. And if it's not necessary, and there's like a small change we could make that isn't as toxic, I feel like that's far better than waiting for animals, amphibians, and to evolve through these chemicals that clearly are toxic. So, I know that there's a lot of you. There's a huge amount of people. Like I said, like just back to it. You've got your antagonists, you've got your bad characters, but for the most part, so many people want to do the right thing. And I'm old enough now that I've seen this sort of progression with like the natural world and animal rights and people. I'm seeing the change because with social media and with the way we're able to communicate now, we now can know so much more with a simple click. And when I feel like when people know, they do try to do the right thing. They do try to change their ways. There's always going to be a few people that don't, but I think most people want a beautiful natural world in their backyard. I think that once people are aware of the harm they're doing, that I think they will stop. or
Yeah.
or amend a bit where they can.
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have people out there who love their manicured
Yep.
lawns and their
Yep.
very pretty landscaped
Yep.
garden, this
Yep.
and that. So
I
with,
think that's so boring.
yeah, I mean, honestly, like I love how here we just kind of
When
let
I
it go
walk by a
wild
garden that
and
is just like straight lines
yeah.
and then like a row of hostas bordering, I'm
Hmm.
just like, that is
Okay.
so boring.
Yeah. Whereas, like if you take a walk in a meadow somewhere and it's just
Yeah.
all these random, I wouldn't even know the names of them, but just
Yeah.
these random like colors and plants and flowers and just like it's just so pretty.
Yeah. On the
It's
beautiful activity. Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
right? It's something different, very different than I don't know, more natural than like that manicured kind of look. It's too, I don't know.
It's absent of life is what it is.
Yeah.
It's absent of life. And isn't that what we want to see? Isn't it exciting to look at interactions outside of ourselves, to watch outside of ourselves happen before us? Like there's so many creatures that are so diverse and unique and the different, I mean, there's stories happening out there constantly.
Oh yeah.
And I want a story on my
Right?
lawn, right? I don't want, I've seen so many like sort of National Geographic moments. I remember another animal that is sadly demonized, but I think they're super cool, are snakes, right? And so one day, there was a snake and he was eating a frog and you're
Yeah.
like, oh my gosh, I'm sorry, frog, but this is nature,
Yeah. Yeah.
but you're never going to really see any interactions like that in a purely, maybe
Yeah.
some people are happy about that, but
Yeah, no, honestly,
but
yeah.
I mean, I personally love it all. And I think a lot of people do, I think a lot of people embrace, what Canada or their own country has to offer. I mean, I always think about like going outside and what balances your emotions and if you were to go outside, you hear the bird song, right? You hear the buzzing, you hear the crickets, and when things are silent, we're uncomfortable. Who wants a silent world? And if that's what we're doing to our lawns and we're using these chemicals and that's what we're this lawn with, that's a silent, absent place, what doesn't benefit on any level, whether it's like sort of, I don't know, like psychically or metaphysically, also in terms of, what de-escalates our stress. And there's so much evidence out there for going out into the natural world and listening and feeling and being a part of the environment and how that is good for our mental health.
And walking outside barefoot and how grounding that is.
Yeah.
100%.
And native plants, like you go out there and I mean, I know it firsthand and I've talked to other people as well that, they'll just stand there and watch and it's good for them. And you might only have like a little bit of land, but you've got this small area and you can check out what's happening and it's a de-stressor. Like it's good for the soul.
Now with native plants, because earlier you had mentioned, like living in an apartment, having a little, so you can plant these into pots. I mean, I know that there is a potted garden type of gardening. So people who do live in apartments who can't have garden beds or, like an acre or whatever of vegetable garden or flower garden, whatever, they can do them in pots. Now, when you plant the native flowers or the native plants, do they come back each year or would that depend on like where they're planted, if it's like in the ground or let's say a raised garden bed, like I've got one at the front of the house there, would that matter or like how often would you plant them?
Well, the majority of them are going to come back every year. They're perennial, the majority of them. There are some annuals. I'm not sure what they are. And even your annuals, they'll usually be self-seeding. Like for example, jewelweed or touch-me-nots. Do you know about those? They're super cute. Jewelweeds are awesome. They're also a hummingbird favorite. They're like a little small tubular flower. They almost look like an orchid. There's a purple variety of jewelweed that is actually invasive, but the orange one is native to here and they're amazing. And they're a small flower tubular. Hummingbirds love them. And they're an annual actually, but they self-seed. So they'll usually they'll take over sort of an area. Mine haven't really spread in my backyard. They're actually like perfectly, for some reason, they managed to get there all on their own. I just haven't touched them. On either side of my greenhouse, so on the other back of my greenhouse behind, there's just all this jewelweed that comes out. That's and the hummingbirds love to go to them anyway. They're beautiful. But yeah, that would be considered an annual, but it self-seeds, and they're called touch me not because they've got this really awesome like little pod that when they're ready to dispel, you just touch them and they literally explode and shoot their they shoot their seeds out. You should Google it like and watch it happen. There's lots of really fun slow-mo pictures of the way that they just like they shoot out. So apparently there's countless people who talked about stores taking their kids out and like touching a jewel weed for the first time. And what a great way to like impact, but in a good way, because you're just shooting off the native seeds, you know?
Wow.
But okay, so but for the most part, they're perennial. So if you're going to have a container garden, you would need to sort of overwinter it somewhere safe. And in a pot, you wouldn't just be able to leave it outside because they would be fine in the ground. But the problem is that in the container, it's not going to have enough protection. So that's where you would, you'd probably have to you'd have to like plant them every year. So I don't have a lot of information like that, but I just instinctually, I would think unless you've got like an intermediary period, like place that you could store those perennials, and you'd have to give them like a little bit of water, like the way that some people would like overwinter their begonias or their, like I overwinter my fuchsia, which is it's a non-native, but I just put it in containers. And so I basically stick it downstairs in my basement away from light, and then I give it just a little bits of water once a month, and then I take it out, put it under lights in like, well, I just did the other day actually, and then it'll just start to get leaves, and then it'll be ready to put back in my pots. So I'm definitely a person that I still have begonias, I still have petunias. Zinnia is a great entrance level into a pollinator plant. It's a non-native, but it does support a lot of non-specialist species. So your hummingbirds will sometimes go to them. Bumblebees, honeybees will go on them, but a lot of your native bees won't. But it's a great pollinator flower. I create a big area of zinnias. I love them. But then what I'm doing is I'm slowly weaving natives in with the zinnia to kind of like have that transition, because sometimes when you start with native plants, it'll take 2 years for it to flower. So because they spend definitely the first season just establishing really good, strong root base, and they go really deep down into the soil, which is another reason why a lot of them are drought tolerant, because they've got such deep roots. And so they establish those, and then the following year they have their blooms. Like, for example, my cardinal flower was like that. There's some that are a little bit more difficult to grow, like bloodroot and anemone, where you have to, which we haven't even talked about yet, they've got to go through like the seeds themselves. If you take them out from the environment, you have to stratify them. So they have to go through a period of cold. So right now in my fridge, I've got about 50 packets, or like just Ziploc bags that have a little bit of soil. And I've got my New York aster, or my evening primrose, my cardinal flower, my great lobelia, on and on and on and on and on, my foxglove beer tongue, all of these things. And then they're just wrapped. They don't take up a lot of space, but they have to have that period of cold. A lot of them. Not all of them do, though.
So you do that in soil. Could you do it outside of soil? Just have the seeds in a bag?
Sand. Some people do sand. Some people apparently you can use like perlite, and it's not soil, it's peat moss.
Right. Okay.
Which I understand, which I do know that's not really sustainable. So some people do it in cocoa coir and things like that. It's just a little bit though that I've got in there, but peat moss is another one of the antagonists in the gardening world, because our peat bogs are definitely not a renewable resource. So I've been trying to add cocoa coir into my gardening to try to like offset my, my use, but anyway, that's another issue. But native plants are great because you can come in at a very like you could come in as a hobbyist, which I definitely am a hobbyist, but the more you nerd out, you can start getting into those more difficult species.
Mm-hmm.
So for someone who's just wanting to say, I'm just new, I don't know much, I don't want to get into stratifying, there are actually a lot of native plants that you don't have to stratify the seed
Mm-hmm.
for them to bloom. So like anise hyssop, the Rudbeckia hirta or black-eyed Susan, Joe Pye weed, milkweed, which are amazing, by the way, like all the milkweeds. And some people are like, oh, milkweeds are a little bit aggressive, but swamp milkweed isn't nearly as aggressive as the common milkweed. And butterfly milkweed,
Mm-hmm.
butterfly flower, because people have demonized some of these plants and called them weeds, which is why some people get a little bit apprehensive about them. They're not weeds. There's people that actually use these in Europe, and you know what I mean?
It's
As
like
beautiful.
dandelions.
So it's dandelions, which is some of our earliest food for pollinators, which is a super important food source because nothing is flowering when they're coming out of hibernation, right? So I would say to start with plants like that. Our lance leaf coreopsis is another one that doesn't need to be stratified. So you just get those. You could get those this season. So yeah, those ones you could get this season and right away plant them, and then they're going to flower this year. Some of them you need to plant a little bit more into the future. So like I said, my cardinal flower didn't actually flower for 3 years because it wasn't in full sun and it didn't have a lot of water. Cardinal flowers like a lot of water. So I ended up putting them like they're right now in kind of like partly sunny and at the bottom of a big hill. So they are getting some water. I think they would have flowered quicker if they were in better. They want to be like right in marshes, full sun, and they probably would have. They would have flowered the second year.
So your cardinal flower, something did grow though before the bloom. Because I planted some wildflower seeds around here, but I think that the soil, which we touched on earlier, here I find is more like a clay base on our land.
Okay.
And I don't know, I'm sure there's dirt, but I'm finding that it's more of a clayish, like in the summer when everything's in full swing. Part of our lawn, I don't know how to describe it, but it reminds me of almost like a desert where we have these, I should take a picture to show you, but these like kind of like little plant type things growing. It's not grass. So it's like partial grass, but then partial something else. And I'm pretty sure it's more of a clay base. And so I threw the seeds down anyways, and I did my best with watering, but nothing had bloomed. And I mean, I don't know if they will or not, but I'm wondering if that has a part of it.
You can look that up. So you can find out. You can find out very quickly if you're looking at any of these, which ones work in a sandy soil, what work in a clay soil, in a medium soil. So it's very researchable. But yeah, sometimes not all plants are going to work for all environments. So that's one thing that people should consider when they're getting into it to have success. And I honestly, you can just throw your seeds in, but I mean, if they're competing with stuff that's already there, it's going to be tricky. So the most of the stuff that I do, for example, I'll do with all of those seeds that I currently have stratifying, or they're exposed to that cold temperature. For some of it, it depends on the flower. Sometimes it's 30 days, 60 days, 90 days. Depends. I just keep them all in together because it's fine if they're in there for longer. But if they haven't stratified enough, that can be a problem. So I just keep them all together. And so then when it starts to warm up, I'll put them in, I'll like use the dense plant method. So I'll get like a strawberry container and I'll fill it up with some soil, and then I'll take them out of the Ziploc bags, and then I'll just kind of sprinkle them on top, just kind of press them down, and then see what happens. And then they at least get established in a place where they're not competing with anything. And then at that point, I could like upplant them into a small container, give them a little bit more time, and then they're happy. They're happy. Then you plant them, and I've had such an amazing success rate with them. And as long as I put them in the right place, because I've obviously made mistakes, as so many people do. It's like, oh, I really want marsh marigold, but like it's not going to grow. I don't have like a water stand, so that's not gonna, it wants to be like in the forest, in like along along like a little, not a river, but like a little creek runoff area. That's where marsh marigold wants to be. They're beautiful. They're adorable. And they're very early. There's so few like early spring ephemerals. and marsh marigold is one of them. They're hard to establish because, you know, how many people have a river just running through. So
Yeah, no
they're also okay in shade too, which is rare to get.
okay.
Yeah, shade early ephemerals are kind of hard to get your hands on. There's like spring beauty. I haven't had any success with germinating spring beauty. So that's one of the hardest things for me, is getting those early pollinator plants. Summer and fall, no problem. Like so many, yeah. But spring is really tricky. That's why I'm like, just, okay, well, the dandelions, just, you know, and if people, you want a bit of a manicured garden, what you can do is just maybe cut 3/4 of it, leave 1/4 of it for some food. You know, it never has to be all or nothing.
Yeah.
You know, because I understand people want a nice lawn. Sometimes people have associations where it can't go beyond a certain amount, but you still want to keep your place looking nice. So just, you know, for where it can be seen from the road, you know, just mow that. And then there's a little kind of more of a natural area in behind.
Yeah.
Yeah. So there's an entrance, kind of like an entrance for everybody. Everybody could find some fun way to get into it that isn't too daunting, and then it gets addicting because it gets really addicting, because I get super excited about the flowering time of the year, because I get it's just life is happening, and suddenly it's so much more full, you know, when there are animals and creatures that are visiting your garden. When you're looking out at your Solomon seal or your foxglove beer tongue, you see the little butt of a bumblebee sticking out, and you're like, hey, what are you doing in there?
Yeah.
So cute, right? And so it's rewarding on on a mental health level, but the benefit also that I think that we should all have, like, a responsibility for the land that we are on, I think is something that we should strive towards as well. Yeah,
I like that. I do remember when we were planting our garden, and actually that's one thing that I feel we can all do if we really wanted to. Nothing crazy, nothing daunting, like you said. Just create a little garden, native flowers, a little vegetable garden, just something to move away from big box stores and their GMO stuff. And that's a whole other conversation. But I do remember when we were planting our garden, and especially cucumbers. Well, there were a lot of things, like the carrots. My beets didn't grow, but my radishes grew. I had a bunch of carrots, which I kind of packed them too tightly because it's a learning curve. But I would always get so excited the moment that I'd see this like little bud.
Right?
I'd be like, oh my God, it's growing. I'd be so excited. And all of our cucumbers grew except for, I think, one seed. So I planted 2 different types. At the end of the day, I don't think that there is really a difference. I know that there is with like Skin and Crunch and all that, but we pickled ours and they were both super delicious. So to us, it doesn't matter. But I planted, I think it was like 4 and 4, and only one of the seeds didn't end up blooming, which was fine because the garden filled up like that. It was like out of control, and I was like, I don't know what I'm doing with this. I know what I'm doing, but like it got a little out of control. But it is so exciting. And then even when I'd be out in the garden and checking on the cucumbers and picking off the ones that were ready, I'd be working with the bees. They'd be flying around, and sometimes their buzzing sounded a little aggressive. So I'd be like, all right, I'm going to step back. You do your thing, right? If there was one out of flower and I didn't realize.
Hungry.
And then I'm like pulling off the cucumber. It shakes the whole thing. So they'd be like, and I'm like, oh, sorry. Okay. So I'd like let them be. But it's so neat to be out there with them. And I've had a few times tending to our tomatoes where a hummingbird would fly right up to me, and I'd just freeze and let it do its thing, and then it would fly off. And like, it's, I don't know, there's just something so amazing about that. Right?
I feel guilty sometimes too, because I'll be on my yard. I have way more non-natives at my home in Thessalon than I do out at camp. And then they'll go onto a begonia. I'm like, I'm sorry, there's nothing. Sorry, but I do like my begonia. You'll see them go, and I'm like, let's go over to the zinnia or whatever. Go in the backyard. There's like purple coneflower out there. Go. But like you said before, the little sprouts, like, seeds are fascinating. Seeds are fascinating. I mean, they're dust. They're just, like I was telling you about the cardinal flower. They can go, I think, 4 or 5 feet, I think, and they have these beautiful, they almost look like canna lilies. That's,
Oh, okay.
they almost look like
Yeah.
canna lilies. And the dust, when you see them, like you basically could just blow it. It's almost like it would, like
Wow.
you wouldn't see it in the air. It's so fine. And how those seeds turn into these beautiful blood. I mean, I'll never, like, I
I
can't wrap
know.
my head around it. How do they have that packed into that, to literally a piece of like smaller than dirt on the ground? I don't know. So if you can't be like just mesmerized by that, that's, and then,
Yeah.
yeah. And so that's kind of why I started sort of getting into it, was just the fascination of like the seed and what happens. But then again, like you start learning, and the more you learn, you can't really garden for too long and listen to your average, like your podcast, without realizing and finding out how gardening needs to sort of amend its ways, you know, to benefit in all ways, right? Get away from that plastic bowl of fruit on the table,
Yeah.
right? And there's so many beautiful native plants, like lance leaf coreopsis. Oh my goodness. And it's a really long bloomer too. If people were to say, like, appease the opposition here, but I do understand that people want their flowers, their animals, they're gonna prolifically flower all season. Your native plants aren't going to do that.
Right.
So that's why I absolutely understand if people are like, I still want some annuals, because I want that all, because it's very tricky and to have a garden succession that, okay, here are my spring flowers, here are my, you know, you're going to want that consistent. A lot of people are going to want that consistent bloom happening. So I absolutely understand that. But there are some natives, like, for example, black-eyed Susan, they will bloom for a long time, right? And your lance leaf coreopsis is probably one of the longest ones. And when you are native planting, you do really want to think about the food for those seasons. And then your annuals, you can have, you know, that are non-native, that aren't causing harm or not invasive, which I don't think we talked about too much, but I do kind of want to talk about that. But they're not causing any harm. Like your petunias, and they're not going anywhere. They're annuals. Your annuals aren't causing any harm, other than the fact that they need fertilizing. They need more water. They need stuff like that. But your invasives, box stores still sell them. There's no governing body that's saying, you know, you can still go pick up goutweed, or you can still buy English ivy, lily of the valley. These are terrible. I know. Who doesn't love lily of the valley? They're so
I know it's
pretty.
poisonous to consume, but
they're so
they smell really
pretty,
nice.
right? And they're cute. And lily of the valley is like a huge invasive plant. And and they'll take out some very, like, there's, I think it's a blue bead, and there's another, it's like foam flower or something like that's a similar sort of delicate native plant, and they're very kind of similar in where they grow, and the lily of the valley will just take them all out. That's why I'm trying to like remove them. And that's another thing, is one of the first things you want to do if you're into this and you're wanting to get into helping the ecosystem and providing a place for our insects and our animals to eat and live and forage through and shelter in, is removing those invasive plants. Basically, we're talking about the caterpillars with that one little example, that basically in like an invasive stand of plants, that like 96% of your caterpillar life will be gone. Right? So you might have a couple here and there, but you add in your native plants instead of those invasive, you're going to have so many more. And I mean, and it's going to be the same for other insects, but we could go on and on about like the different insects. And I'm not an expert either, so I don't know. That's one of the main animals I know about. But the English ivy, I think a lot of these were planted in the 50s and the 60s, 70s and 80s. And, you know, and they are horrific. The English ivy, the ones that grow up the homes and they climb. Oh, well, they climb everywhere. And what they do,
they really embed into the walls of the, so when people want to take it down, they're like ripping roots out from, like, if let's say it's a brick house, that, what is that? Mortar or whatever.
Yeah, the mortar in there.
They crack their way through and really embed in. Oh my gosh.
And so what do they do to the trees? So they spread all along the bottom of the floor. And so all of your ground cover gone. And then they go up the tree and they strangle it. Wow. They move all along the branches. They draw out the resources from the ground, And then and this is even in Thessalon, this is happening along the river, is these English, my husband and I have gone and like ripped them out, and he had permission to do it, because you always want to get permission with stuff like this, even though it's public land. But the head of the Horticultural Society, they're like, yeah, I planted those trees. If something's harming them, you guys can go ahead and rip them out. But you want to rip out the invasive species, daylilies, the orange daylilies. Invasive species.
So back to those ivies, I will say it is cool, although they are invasive, but it is cool, like how you just described it with how it takes out its like, that's kind of cool, like what nature can do. I know.
Yeah.
Kind of neat how they know, like, okay, we're gonna go here and climb up and slowly strangle this tree.
Yeah. You see, have this small plant that will take out a huge white pine, and
which I know isn't good.
But there are, I believe there's like coral honeysuckle. And again, with all natives, it's important for people to understand that I might say something like Cory honeysuckle, and people say, oh, honeysuckle, and they'll order a honeysuckle, and then they'll get an invasive one. So it's like, you want to just double check that if you're hearing something, that you double check that it is the right one. So for example, I talked about foxglove beard tongue. It's kind of penstemon. It's like the Latin name. And they're amazing for hummingbirds and bees and native insects and things like that. But there's foxglove, right? And people are like, oh, she said foxglove. And so you can just order foxglove at the Home Depot, and you think that that's a native plant because the person said foxglove. But there's what's called like cultivars of different native plants. And the further away you get from the native plant, the less beneficial it's going to be for those local species.
Wow.
Right? So, and of course, something's better than nothing, but you really, as much as possible, people should try to get the native ones. And then there's some that will like hybridize. So red columbine is an early spring blooming, and hummingbirds like them too. So it's early food for hummingbirds, red columbine. But then there's cultivars of that where they've been hybridized. And so if you have red columbine, they'll cross-pollinate, and then you'll end up getting this hybridized columbine. So once you have your stand of red columbine that are native, at that point, if you feel comfortable doing it, you could take out the other stuff. And then as long as there isn't any other columbine nearby, you should be good. And then you should have natives. Lupin is the same. So we've got a beautiful native lupin, beautiful tubular flower as well. And apparently the fireflies really like them. That's in the long, and that are fireflies, right? You want fireflies? If you can have a section of like long grasses, and apparently they like lupins too, but long grasses, and you're kind of leaving some areas wild for the creatures to hide and to live in. Like they need places to mate, and they need places to sleep and to eat from, obviously. It's just another part of native gardening is that you've got these species around now. They also need places to go. So can you like leave a little section of your yard that's untended, that you've got some logs over there, and that's some places where your white-throated sparrows might hang out, because they are kind of like a ground bird, that they're always hopping around the leaf, And if you have a little bit more land, I know it's not possible for everyone, but if you can leave some sections a little bit untended, what you'll get to see, right? So you've got some long grasses, you go outside, you can see fireflies. Who doesn't want to see fireflies?
I did read that they were starting to disappear.
Yeah. Some people believe that it's aesthetically pleasing to have a completely symmetrical garden, or space, and that's just not conducive to a lot of our species.
Yeah, no kidding. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay, so anything else you want to add or talk about?
Yeah, I think we covered a lot. We talked about all the places that they could go for native plants, and I think did we cover enough? I think we covered enough. Like kind of.
I think we covered a lot.
Yeah, like the species that people could like, that are like user friendly ways to sort of like enter into this.
Okay, so for closing words, I would say, do you have any words for people who find interest in this? Like, what would be your, I guess, like advice for helping the environment and native flowers and that kind of stuff? Like, what would you say to people?
I'd say learn, have fun with it, because I think if you're invested and you learn. I mean, where I feel like gardeners are learners, you know, and the more you learn, the more you're going to be impassioned. So I'd say get out there, start listening to different podcasts, A Way to Garden by like Margaret Roach, or even Joe Gardner, who's very famous. I mean, a lot of our gardeners are know who he is. He does a lot of native plant stuff. Uli Lorimer, Doug Tallamy. Start listening to these podcasts, and because they're far more fascinating to hear, like these are experts, right? Yeah. And I'm a hobbyist and I've got a love for it myself, but I don't have all that information that you're going to learn from these people. Are going to give you far more reasons to be excited about the natural world. They're entomologists and biologists. So just learn and take in all that information. And I feel like that is what's going to cause people to say, hey, this is really cool. This is what I want to do. And then learn and realize that life is busy, but just start small and experiment and have fun with it. And also the most important thing, just be a steward for the place that you occupy, right? Just do your best to cause the least amount of harm that you can handle and the most amount of good that you can handle by diminishing those things that are not serving the natural world, and try to give them a little bit of help, you know, because it's a lot harder for them. We can go to the grocery store to get our food, you know, and very rarely does someone just turn off the switch, but we're turning off the switch in a lot of ways for these beautiful natural creatures. And no one wants to be in a world where it's silent and it doesn't have color and it doesn't have life. So if we can be a little bit of a part of it, just embrace it and go at your own pace and have fun with it.
Beautiful. Yeah. Well said. And I agree with the busy life. We do live busy lives, but it's a good way to slow down and be a little bit more present and just take a pause and like enjoy what's out there. Yeah. Awesome.
Very cool.
All right.
Thank you so thank you so much I love talking about this. I'm so glad you're interested in it.
Yeah, for sure.
So I really enjoyed this. It was fun.
Thanks for coming on. I appreciate it.